Hello, and thanks for joining us on another edition of NES Generation.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at the 22nd edition of Nintendo Power, which features Metal Storm on the cover.
We'll also be taking a look at G.I. Joe and Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom. If there's a particular game you're interested in, we've put comments in the description that let you jump directly to those games.
And if you have a favorite robot-themed NES game, make sure you tell us in the comments below.
Let's jump right in. Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom was published by Hudson Soft in 1991 and released on the NES. It was originally a game made for Japanese home computer systems. It's a screen-by-screen exploration adventure game similar to Shadowgate. You're using verb text buttons similar to the way you do in Shadowgate, and picking actions and look, pick up, take, those sort of things. They had some interesting ones. Praise.
Buy.
There were some interesting options in what they chose to have for the options. I did like they for interacting, it gave you a list of the things you had to interact with versus like something like Shadowgate where you're clicking pick up and then having to click on an item.
Right.
So that was kind of nice. So give us an overview of the story, Laurel.
So basically, some guy named Minister Pumpkin kidnaps Princess Tomato, King Broccoli's daughter, and then King Broccoli dies of sadness because he's really sad about his daughter being kidnapped. But before he dies, he asks the player, who you later learn is named Sir Cucumber, to save his daughter. So basically you're advancing throughout the game trying to find and save Princess Tomato.
So a big theme obviously in this game is sort of everyone being food or plant-based. It was kind of an interesting theme, but overall, it was similar to other kind of RPG story type stuff, but just with a kind of a vegetable theme to everything.
Right, like the first character you meet is Percy the baby persimmon, and he follows you around and is your sidekick, and he even has his own action button, which is funny.
I thought it was interesting that even to get him to join, there's other games that do this too, but you meet him kind of right off the bat.
Right.
But he doesn't join you until you've done, we don't want to give away the plot, but you have to do something to get him to join your team and come along with you. One thing I think that, and it's similar to the other adventure screen-by-screen type style of games, is that once you've played through it once or twice, it's probably not something that has a lot of replay value because you already know where everything is and the steps and everything to do that. There might be some hidden secret things to find and things like that, but it seems like mostly kind of a one-time playthrough sort of thing.
Yeah.
I did think that it had almost too many action buttons. It felt like there was just so much, for example, I had like check and look, which seemed pretty similar. And
you have hit and fight, which is interesting how those are different, I guess.
So it feels like you could easily miss a puzzle by thinking oh, I already tried punching or hitting that item, but I had to use fight or that sort of thing. So it makes a lot more combinations that you have to do to figure it all out. So what are some of the other things you thought were interesting about this game?
This game is it's sectioned off in different chapters. So I played through up until chapter 2. It has some really cute music.
Yeah, I enjoyed the music to it.
Yeah, and the game overall is just pretty cute. Really simple, but puzzly, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of finding items and using them in different combinations in different locations and finding the right place to use the items. It mentions the farmies.
Right.
Did you get to that where you saw who they were, or?
We didn't get to see who they were, except it told us that that they weren't actually vegetables, and that I'm assuming that they're supposed to be farmers.
That would make sense. So then I guess that's kind of an interesting idea as well. Then that you're sort of living in the almost like a lot of Disney movies or things where the animals have a persona to them.
Right.
But they're living in the human world still, so that's kind of an interesting play. Definitely one I'll probably want to sit down at some point and play into a little more and see how the story plays out.
G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
G.I. Joe was produced by Ken Lobb and developed by a team that later formed Kid, published by Taxan in 1991. It's a run-and-gun platforming game and allows you to play with 3 of the Joe team members at a time. It's got the classic fighting against Cobra, the terrorist organization. So you're working your way through a storyline, selecting the different characters. So you've got Duke, Snake Eyes, Blizzard, Captain Gridiron, and Rock and Roll. You make your choice and then jump into the levels. So what did you think about G.I. Joe, Laurel?
I thought it was an extremely difficult game. I tried out all the characters, and my favorite was Snake Eyes, who kind of had this like ninja thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. He was one of my favorite characters growing up. I had some comic books and things that featured him pretty prominently. And he was always, so in the cartoon, he was silent, and in the comics, like he never spoke. So it was kind of an interesting character. I really liked the style, and the artwork and stuff is really well done, I think.
Right.
Overall, I felt like it was pretty well polished game.
Right.
So you've got the ability to switch between, like we've seen in quite a few other games like Batman and different ones, where you've got your melee attack, which is sort of infinite attack, and then you've got the weapon that uses ammo.
Right.
And you can switch back and forth between those two. I felt it was pretty generous with the power-ups as you went through the level.
Right.
A lot of games, like, ammo is super scarce. This one felt like it was pretty balanced as far as that. I didn't feel like I was like running out of ammo all the time. And it was interesting, like going back to Snake Eyes, you had mentioned he can jump higher.
Right.
Specifically, I noticed on the first battle, the boss battle, he worked out really well. So it's this plane you're fighting, and it's dropping missiles. That first part is fine with any of the characters, but then it breaks off into a separate back piece where it would split into 2 pieces. So then the back piece starts doing kind of like a swoop attack, where it swoops downwards, and it's really hard to not bump into it. But if you're Snake Eyes, you can easily jump over it because you jump so high.
Right.
So I noticed that was an interesting thing with that first boss battle. One thing I thought was really cool in that first level was the use of, not parallax per se for scrolling, but the foreground elements. So it had like trees that were in front of you, and then there was enemies that you could see kind of in the foreground that would jump in front of your character as you got to them. So that kind of gave it a depth feel versus a lot of platformers just feel like a flat 2D look to them. So that was interesting. And then the second level was more of a had a lot more vertical feel to the layout of the level. So it was almost kind of like a maze going around, and you were trying to plant bombs.
Yeah.
So I thought it had a pretty good variety just even in the first 2 levels, versus a lot of games are just switching it up with, some different graphics or whatever. But this actually felt like a different mechanic right off the bat there in the second level. Our final game for this episode is Metal Storm. It was developed by Tamtex and published by Irem in 1991. It was featured on the cover of this issue of Nintendo Power, and is a action platformer, similar to G.I. Joe that we just looked at. The other thing I thought I would show, just because it relates to Metal Storm, is a picture that I drew actually when I was in, I think, middle school. And my grandmother actually framed it. It's not one of my best pieces of artwork, but she was super impressed, and so I thought I would show it here. It's funny because I just had drawn it on an old roll of butcher paper, which is now super yellowed paper. But I thought it would be fun to show you that, Laurel, because I was drawn at about the age you were. So the year is 2501. In a defense base on Pluto, a robot-controlled laser gun malfunctions and starts destroying the solar system, and has already destroyed Neptune. So the previous attempts to activate the self-destruct feature has failed, and the player must storm Pluto base to save the solar system. So what did you think about this, Laurel?
I thought this game was also difficult, but it was definitely fun. Like, you weren't able to take any damage, so if you got hit once, you'd die, and then if you died 3 times, it was a game over.
So that definitely was tricky. The one hit thing. There were armor power-ups that if you get would allow you to get hit once, that I managed to get a few times. I think there's one at the beginning of the second part of the first stage. Overall, I thought this game had a really cool aesthetic. Like the fonts they used.
Right.
It just had a really cool feel of kind of an industrial area. The color palette felt unique.
Yeah.
Although I felt like the character didn't stand out very well.
Right, like it could kind of blend into the background.
I think it was just because it was just a few colors. I don't know, something about it just didn't feel like it popped to me. So I guess the big thing in this game is the gravity switching mechanic that allows you to reverse gravity so that instead of walking on the ground, you're walking on the ceiling. And that really took quite a bit to get used to for me. I thought it was a really cool mechanic, but at the same time, you would flip, and then things like trying to time your jumps and stuff felt really tricky to get when you were upside down, because I think your brain is just so used to the idea of gravity going one way that you sort of take that for granted, and it takes a second to kind of process that upside down. And then another thing I thought was interesting with that mechanic was the idea that you could only jump up through platforms, but not down through them. And they used that a little bit in some of the early levels, and then especially I think when you get into the second level and later, there's some more complex things where it's just bunches of stacked platforms and you're having to like flip the gravity back and forth to be able to jump up through them in the right order.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really cool game and really well done. It's actually I believe one of the more expensive NES games to this day, because it was fairly obscure back when it came out, which is surprising, I guess, considering it was on the cover of Nintendo Power. But for whatever reason, I never knew anybody that had it, and I think it just didn't sell super well. But it's a really good game. To this day, people want to play it. Thanks for watching this episode of Next Generation.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure you leave a like and subscribe.